let's try this again. I've tried to record this a couple times with mixed results, obviously. That's why I'm doing it again. Part 4 of the alarming truth behind anti-Mormonism, called The Book of Mormon powerfully responds to this mindset in regards to the whole atheism is trying to force people to do a level of equality, which is trying to be a moral negation, really. Basically saying that all choices are the same and no choice can be better than another, which is ridiculous. But let's go ahead and keep going. Do you remember when Lehi says there must needs be an opposition in all things? Latter-day Saints often associate that sermon with the purpose of trials and hardships. But there's far more to it than that. Well, I've read it and I've heard the excuses people make with it, but it has meant very little to me, honestly. The scriptures, I left the church early enough that I never got so drawn into the scriptures that I ever took them serious in the way that you seem to be implying they should be here. But I am aware of what they say. I'm aware of how people use them. So, in a recent conference talk, Elder Oaks affirmed that Lehi wasn't just talking about opposition in the sense of difficulty, but more particularly about opposition in the sense of differences or opposites. Okay, what Elder Oaks says means very little. Again, you're talking about authority figures within your church, and you don't take them all seriously either. And I'll go ahead and use one that a lot of Mormons hate when it's used, and they have all sorts of reasons why they think that it's a bad position or whatever. But if you look at what Brigham Young said in conference about Adam as God, yeah, that is now completely shut down by the church. You're not even, they pretty much distance themselves from that completely. At one point, they tried to pretend like it was never said, even though it's right there in their own books, the Journals of Discourse. And everyone can open it up and read it themselves. So that obviously didn't work out really well for them, but now they don't deny that it was said, but they try to downplay its importance and that a prophet specifically made a prophecy which they clearly say is not what it is. And I understand the new stuff overwrites the old. Well, if that's the case, then the new stuff's built on the old. I mean, if Brigham Young was a false prophet, let's go ahead and give Joseph Smith to you. There's plenty of issues there, but let's give Joseph Smith to you. He dies without leaving someone specific that's supposed to take over. You have multiple people claiming that they should be the next person. Brigham Young is one of those people. Well, if the branch he took to Utah is started by a false prophet, which if you think that if you take the Bible definition of a prophet, then anyone who makes a prophecy that doesn't come true, you are not to be afraid of him. You're supposed to deal with him and yada yada. I can find that exact scripture for you if you really want. Go ahead and request in the comments. I'll reply. I don't care. That's an easy one to find. I've looked it up multiple times. But basically, if he is a false prophet and everything after that is built on the way that he says it's supposed to be, then the whole system collapses as a result. So the modern prophets saying that what the first prophet in this line said is not true, that it's false prophecy. I mean, their whole thing is he was acting as a man, not as a prophet. Okay. So every time that he says something you don't like, Well, that was just him acting as a man. Every time he says something you do like, oh, that was him acting as a prophet. I don't think that prophecy works that way. I mean, you can't say that he wasn't acting as a prophet. If you read what he said, and we'll do a video on that talk, because it is very clear that he is acting as a prophet. If you read that, and you have any confusion that he means it, that is exactly what he wants people to take away from it, then you are not reading the same thing that he wrote, or that he read, that he said in that journal conference. So, sorry. I don't think that the leadership of today really has a whole lot to stand on. I don't take authoritarian positions as this great way of finding truth. Authoritarian positions are there to tell you what to do instead of letting you think about what you should do. Authoritarian structures are hopefully going to go away over time, because having someone dictate what everyone should do, I mean, the extreme of that is North Korea. He supposedly is a god, which, I mean, I don't think you believe that. I don't believe that. But he is to be treated as a god and worshipped as a god within that country. And they have to center their whole life around him. I mean, his country is the extreme of authoritarianism. But your church seems to think, well, as long as it's our authoritarianism, then it's good. If it's their authoritarianism, it's bad. Sorry, I think it's authoritarianism in general. But I'll try not to linger too long on each part here. With that understanding, watch how Lehi's words respond to the goal of postmodern atheism, and to bring about God's eternal purposes in the end of man. It must needs be that there was an opposition, even the forbidden fruit in opposition to the tree of life. Wherefore the Lord God gave unto man that he should act for himself, but man could not act for himself, save it should be that he was enticed by the one or the other. Okay, just to get this out of the way. He's basically setting it up, the forbidden fruit in opposition to the tree of life. Good, evil, God, devil. Without both forces being in place, he says, man could not act for himself, save it should be that he was enticed by the one or the other. False dichotomy much? I mean, you only have two choices, extreme good, extreme evil. You have no way of actually, if you aren't with God, you're against him, basically. You're drawing a line in the sand. Well, guess what? People can be good. As mentioned in the previous video, there are non-religious countries where they actually have very good behavior and very low crime rates, and generally speaking, are good societies. Even by your definition. I mean, aside from the drinking tea and coffee and stuff like that, I mean, and not necessarily buying into your thoughts about LGBT and such. But if you want a video specifically about that, we can deal with that at a different time. But the thought that God doesn't exist doesn't suddenly mean that you're going to be over here with the devil and just doing things that are clearly wrong, that non-believers have no reason to say are right. I mean, the whole idea that people want to rape and kill if they don't believe in God. I've heard many people say in the atheist community that they've raped and killed as many people as they want to, which happens to be zero. I think there's truth to that. I mean, honestly, why would you assume that the lack of belief would make you want to destroy everyone around you? We're social beings. We want to work with other people. We want an environment where we can work together, and there's tribalism there, and hopefully we can get over a lot of that. But honestly, the whole idea that if you don't accept God, then you must be some extreme other side. Again, I think you're demonizing everyone who walks away, trying to make them less than human so that those who are in the church can feel better about just ignoring them completely. Lehi explains that for agency to work, man must not only have freedom but choices. The goal of atheism, however, is to destroy the moral distinction between choices. Or in other words, the goal of atheism is to destroy the agency of man, at least to the extent possible. Choices are not going to magically become to the point where there's no bad choices. Sorry, we've already touched on this briefly, and it's just nonsense, complete and utter nonsense. Again, countries that are non-religious aren't sitting here trying to remove consequences from bad choices and trying to make them all good or anything like that. That's just complete and utter hogwash. So what you say they're doing is nothing like what they're doing. And in regards to agency, honestly, you're the one who's fighting agency. You're the one who wants an authoritarian dictator. You want the church to govern the lives of the people who are under it. And you will tell me that you don't want it anything like North Korea. But I think you'd feel differently if the church had a much stronger position. I honestly think that if the church was still the head of the state in Utah, meaning Utah never got statehood, so they are their own entity, their own country, as they would be in this case, in this scenario, I think that you would consider them to be the authority, and you would be okay with basically them removing the choice of people and basically saying this is exactly what you're supposed to do, and basically criminalizing even potentially thoughts. I mean, they've been brought around to being tolerant of people who are LGBT. Love the sinner, hate the sin, or whatever. Basically accept the fact that these people are human and all that, or at least that's the rhetoric that is sometimes spun. But they wouldn't be accepted in that situation, I'm quite sure. Just looking at the way that they treated African Americans in the day and the way that they've treated women over time. Honestly, I do not see that we would actually be having the conversation in this context. You'd be actually in favor of their position at that time in that situation, which would be far more controlling, far less agency, if you will, to the person to make up their own mind for some of these choices. And you would say that they're moral, even though it would be hating blacks, and further oppression of women and stuff like that. These are positions that they were brought to by society. So again, like I said in the last video, I think that you have things reversed as far as where the morality is actually coming from. The church is being brought to the morality. It has on several topics, kicking and screaming in some respects, and they're still kicking and screaming about LGBT. But I think that eventually we will see that change. All right, to continue, he ends with a quote. I believe it's from the Book of Mormon. For part 4, I might try to finish up part 5 too in this video, since they've all been pretty long, and these are 2 of the shorter sections. For it must needs be that there is an opposition in all things. If not so, righteousness could not be brought to pass, neither wickedness, neither holiness nor misery, neither good nor bad. Wherefore all things must needs be a compound in one. Wherefore, if it should be one body, it must needs remain as dead, having neither happiness nor misery, neither sense nor insensibility. And basically what we have here is a bunch of word salad. It sounds kind of inspiring. I mean, you must have good to have bad, you must have righteousness to have evil, you must have blah, 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 blah. But really, if you had a righteous people, by your definition even, let's go ahead and say that, you're basically saying that if they remained righteous, which is what God was telling them to do, which apparently this all-knowing person, or at least this very smart God thinks is possible, otherwise he wouldn't command it. At least I would have a hard time thinking he'd command it. Hey, I know you can't do this, but hey, I'm going to tell you to do it anyway because I know you'll fail. That's quite the God right there. But let's go ahead and say he thought we could, or that no, he knows that we couldn't because he already knows. So, oh wow, it's kind of weird trying to figure out how it could even potentially make sense. If you must have both, and God knows this, then why does he demand that his people be good when he knows that that's going to, by definition, mean that some are bad? I mean, that is that's him basically saying, I know that you have to fail because in order for others to succeed, people have to fail. And so I don't want all my children back. I mean, I want enough of them to fail to let others succeed, even though those people are still trying. So I'm going to sit here and screw them over. Actually, I think that's pretty accurate. Based on what is said, if he really says that there must be wickedness for righteousness, there must be misery for holiness, there must be bad for good, there must, for it must needs be that there is an opposition in all things. He is basically saying that by definition, he doesn't want us all to succeed. He has rigged it so that people must needs fail. So I like the way that reads. But yeah, it's ridiculous. All right, and the final little bit here, wherefore this thing must needs destroy the wisdom of God and his eternal purposes. I think he's talking about the devil feels that he must destroy God, which would mean that we're all on the opposite side, all the wickedness and misery. But wouldn't that still be in contrast? For it must needs be that there is an opposition in all things. If so, wickedness could not be brought to pass, neither righteousness, neither misery nor holiness, neither bad nor good. Reverse everything, and all of a sudden you are in basically the same thing. There's no way that you can say that evil is going to try to destroy all good, because by definition, you're saying that there will be good. It's just a mess. Okay, let's move on. I don't. That was supposedly the aha moment. I don't see it. I didn't feel it. I didn't. All I got is a big what out of that. But all right. Final section, an important and final conclusion. If you have struggled with doubt, or you know someone who has, so too have apostles and prophets before they became such. Doubt is not found by the weak alone. You know what's so funny about that? One of the hardest things to do if you don't believe, or if you find that that the beliefs don't make sense to you, is to leave. The weak alone, the people who leave, who actually are able to be honest to themselves and others. That is strength. That is strength that you don't know anything about. To be shunned by family and friends, to be distanced from sometimes relationships, have marriages broken apart, not because of anything wrong they did, but because they didn't feel the same way about the beliefs. They found that they couldn't believe it. They actually looked into it and they found it nonsensical. No, I'd say the weak ones are those who sit there, as you're about to describe, who feel that they're split between staying in the church or leaving the church. They don't know what to do. They're in a crisis of faith. And they turn towards what's comfortable and ignore all evidence that says that is not true. They become weak because they basically say, I'd rather ignore everything that I can see, verify, and critically think about, that I can investigate, that I can actually know in light of what's comfortable and what I know. Weak alone, really? You're calling everyone weak who has had these questions and has made a different choice than you have. I personally experienced overwhelming doubt in my darkest moments when I felt like I was losing touch with reality, no longer knowing what was real and what was true. The only thing that enabled me to hold on a little longer was what I just finished sharing in this article. In my moments of desperation, this is what I imagine. So here's an anecdotal statement about basically what I'd almost call a meditation. A guy, he closes his eyes and he pictures this environment in order to help give himself comfort in his choices. So here we go. I'm just going to read through it quickly. I see myself looking out into a dark and stormy world where two paths lie before me. I feel confused as to which I should take. I have no way of really knowing which path I would want to take, for I cannot be sure where either leads. As confusion settles in, I look to see where the path on the left seems to lead. As I look out into the distance, there appears to be a dark and horrific abyss, and it seems as if this path will lead me there. But as I turn to the right, I look to see where the other path leads. There appears to be nothing in the distance, but suddenly I see what looks like a flicker of light. It seems as though it might be just a small flame from a single candlestick. It's hard to know if it's just my imagination, but something tells me that it is real, and this fills me with hope. Ultimately, I must decide to take one path or the other. Either way, the decision is really a question of faith. Which path do I believe will lead me to where I want to go? Which path will bring the happiness I seek? Am I left to choose between the path that seems to lead to an immense abyss, or the path that seems to lead to that flicker of light? And as I have chosen to move closer to the flickering light, despite the confusion and doubt that sometimes assail, I invariably catch a better glimpse of the light, and I see that it is no candlelight, but a blazing star of gigantic proportions. This, through the haze and darkness, it was just sometimes hard to see. Yeah, I've been there. As a kid, yes, but it was even that much more distinct where basically I was confused about what would happen if I actually let myself face the doubts I had inside. And it's not an abyss, but it feels that way when you look at it from within, because you know what's expected of you. You know what people think of others that don't agree, who don't accept the same thing. It feels like an abyss from within because you have not ever seen it really. So I can understand what you're saying. And the little bit of hope that what you've been told is right, might be true, does seem to be kind of inviting, but it means turning away from everything that you've learned that caused that doubt, of just ignoring it and pretending like it doesn't exist. And honestly, the couple times I tried that made me feel like crap. It does not actually lead to happiness. You pretend like it does because you are told that there's so much happiness, and so you make the most of it. I've seen people in the church who just sit there and put on a smile. Not everyone is miserable there. No, I'm not trying to say that. But the happiness isn't from the church in most cases. It's from the community and from their involvement. And if you can get that community and that involvement without the church, then there's no need for it to be this horrendous thing to not believe. But let's go ahead and finish up. You just have your testimony here. You say, I add my testimony to millions of others that Christ lives. I have had too many experiences with both the flickering light and the blazing star to believe otherwise. I believe humankind has a purpose. I believe that there is a right and a wrong, and I believe that there is a God and an eternal law. And because of these things, I am a Latter-day Saint, for the alternative is the atheism that would guide our civilization into the abyss if we ever give it the chance. Yeah, I don't think I have to add a whole lot as to why this whole thing is just a mess. I've discussed each part as we approach it. Let's just talk about the titles briefly here. The first one, there's only one credible alternative to the restored gospel. False dichotomy. You're saying either virtue or nothingness. And yeah, you try to say it a little differently throughout, but ultimately you say that if it's not true, then we're going to atheism. So in the end, that's exactly what your first point is. Crises of faith in LDS communities are really just a symptom of a larger problem. Yeah, people being able to investigate. That's the larger problem. You don't want people to be able to investigate. You think that they should listen and obey, Oh, wait, no, you wouldn't say listen and obey. You would say listen and pray, and then follow the Spirit, which had better say the same thing as the prophet does, because guess what? The prophet's right. He's the living prophet. You got to know that he's right because he is the leader of the church. But you know what? Listen and then pray, and they will lead you the right way. Okay, not quite sure I'm on board, honestly. Really, I don't think so. Postmodern atheism is paving the way for a new and destructive moral order. I think I destroyed this pretty well. I mean, I could do much more in depth if I did some research on this and just like dove into exactly what the least religious countries, all the different rates, but I know that overall they're in much better position than we are to talk about um, low rates of crime, including sexual crime and assaults and all that. It's almost as though religiosity is not a cure for such things, Christian or Mormon. Um, so it's not necessarily atheism destroying morals here. And then for the Book of Mormon powerfully responds to this mindset. Well, you proposed something that is said and it was kind of nonsensical, and then your conclusion was just to ignore anything that leads you to what you call the abyss, which for a lot of people is investigation, actually looking into claims and trying to figure out if they're true. So you want them to turn away from any doubts, to, as the church says, to doubt their doubts. Yeah, that's honest. Doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith. Wow. I don't know of a more dishonest position. If your doubts come from any form of research, then maybe you let yourself try to dig in a little more on the side that should be on the right side in your mind. But if there's nothing there, if there's nothing to call right, maybe you have to accept what your research shows. But I'm going to call it quits for now. That is the end of the alarming truth behind anti-Mormonism.